What is going on, everyone? James Hancock here. I'm back to review the season premiere of Paolo Sorrentino's The New Pope, the sequel to The Young Pope from 2016, one of my favorite shows in recent memory. Last time around, we had to wait months to get this show in the United States, but now we're almost up to speed with the rest of the world. Italy got to see this episode first a few days ago, followed by the UK, and now it's on HBO here in America. Also, I should add that in the interim between the two seasons, I did have the chance to go to Rome and go on a proper tour of the Vatican. I'm not a religious person, but I do love art, and getting to see so many masterpieces like Raphael's The School of Athens up close and personal was one of the most awe-inspiring experiences of my life. In any event, this season will be 9 episodes total, with every single episode directed by Paolo Sorrentino. And I have to say, I love this new trend of allowing dynamic filmmakers direct an entire season of television. Whether you're talking about David Lynch in Twin Peaks: The Return, or Nicholas Winding Refn with Too Old to Die Young, for me, this blurring of the lines between auteur-driven filmmaking and long-form episodic storytelling, it's one of the most exciting things happening today in the world of film and television, especially when you have a filmmaker as wildly original as Paolo Sorrentino. So far, I've seen his films The Great Beauty and Youth, and obviously the TV show The Young Pope, but I'm dying to check out his recent movies Loro 1 and 2. But for now, let's focus on this particular show, one that picks up 9 months after the events of The Young Pope, where we saw Pope Pius XIII collapsing at the end of season 1. We learned that he's been in a coma all this time, which opens the door to a much-needed new pope, the selection of which forms the bulk of the drama this first episode. This episode was a real showcase for the extraordinary talents of actor Silvio Orlando, who plays Cardinal Vogliello, the Secretary of State. I thought he was the true secret weapon in season 1, and I can't remember ever laughing harder than seeing him in his soccer uniform while walking away in sadness after realizing that his team has lost a game. In any case, with Lenny, aka Pius XIII, deep in a coma, and with John Malkovich not yet taking center stage, Silvio Orlando really got to hog the spotlight this episode, and he did not disappoint. The episode eases into the drama with some fascinating scenes early on, where we see a nun giving Lenny a sponge bath, very carefully keeping his naughty bits covered before she indulges in a little masturbation off screen. And then the scene was followed by this incredible opening credit sequence where nuns who are up in the middle of the night smoking cigarettes and trying on perfume, they begin to writhe in their nightgowns before a pulsing cross, like a scene straight out of some sacrilegious kinky nightclub. And for me, that's always been one of the biggest assets of this show, is how it blends modern style and sensibilities and music with one of the oldest, most powerful institutions on the planet. We soon learn that Lenny's going through his 3rd attempt at a heart transplant, and we see his spirit moving about the operating room, slyly observing the surgery and those in attendance. But sadly, this is about all we get of Jude Law this episode until the very end of the episode. His most loyal fan, Esther, believes that this 3rd transplant will also prove to be a failure, but she prays for him all the same, as do many others who are now practically indulging in idolatry in their admiration for Lenny, something that Vogliello finds very dangerous. And the character that really grabbed my interest this episode is Bauer, played by Mark Evanier, who appears to be a ruthlessly efficient operator working for Vogliello. They discuss how in the light of tariffs, threats, multiple sex scandals, and Lenny's coma, a new pope is absolutely needed. Now, I'm going to need to rewatch the ending of this episode, but it appeared to me as if it was at least being implied that Bauer played a role in Francis II's untimely demise, in that the show kept cutting away to Bauer eating clams as we see Francis II collapsing with chest pains. Hopefully the next episode will confirm this, but Bauer appears as if he's going to be massively important to the action this season. But after this fantastic scene where we see Vogliello meeting with the other cardinals in a bamboo forest, Vogliello finally makes his move to try and become the new pope, going up against Hernandez, who appears to be his perfect clone, apart from not having a mole on his face. And I found this entire election scene to be absolutely riveting. I love how the show kept cutting away to close-ups of these stunning works of art, all to the tune of club music to give the proceedings a little extra spice. And we hear all these conflicting internal monologues by the cardinals describing all the various qualities they would wish to see in the next pope. One cardinal named John Brannix keeps getting votes, but it soon becomes clear that Hernandez is going to win a majority. And Vogliello's rivalry with him is so intense that he convinces all of his own supporters to vote for a guy named Viglietti, who they think is naive, simple-minded, and will be easy to manipulate. But I love how the show finds so many unusual ways to insert brilliant comedy. As Vogliello's describing his plan, he places his hand on the bandaged forehead of another cardinal, and he keeps kind of staring up at Vogliello with this hysterical expression as Vogliello's speaking to them. I was laughing so hard that it ended up missing a lot of the dialogue. But as it turns out, the new pope, who chooses the name Francis II, proves to be a disaster for Vogliello. During his first homily, his speech is snatched away by a bird, and suddenly he starts to realize that he has enormous power and he can say whatever he likes. And he decides he wants to follow the example of St. Francis of Assisi and give away all of his wealth, as well as all the wealth of the Vatican, and open its doors to all the poor migrants in the region. And apparently the Vatican has assets worth roughly $15 billion. So this is obviously a moment of acute crisis for the Vatican's normal way of doing things. And we get another hysterical scene where Vogliello is playing a first-person shooter as he discusses all their options. Meanwhile, Francis II, he takes over with his army of friars who block off areas preventing cardinals from entering. They change all the passwords to all the various bank accounts and vaults. And Francis very boldly claims that the time of privilege is over and that a holy life of poverty has begun. He wants surveillance to prevent any sexual acts of any kind. He plans to defrock Vogliello entirely, and he plans on unveiling all the dirty secrets that could place many of the cardinals in jail. The crisis is such that Vogliello and Hernandez team up to instate Brannox in Francis's place. And in yet another great comedic moment, Hernandez asks Vogliello why they've never gotten along, and in spite of being like complete and total doppelgangers, Vogliello tells Hernandez they're just too different. So we soon see Francis II collapsing from a heart attack, and if there was any evidence of foul play, I didn't catch it. My assumption is that Bauer played a role, but I can't say for sure, and obviously this opens the door to John Malkovich's character, a self-confessed fragile man, but one that I assume will be a formidable rival and adversary for Lenny once he recovers. The plot thickens when we see signs of Lenny's imminent recovery when his finger starts moving. And right then, perfectly on cue, the theme music to the show, music that I absolutely love, it kicked in, reminding me all over again just how much I love this show. I guess it was around 3 years ago that the first season aired on HBO, and I didn't realize how much I miss it. And I know a lot of people watch this show for many reasons, many of which are rooted in religious beliefs. And while I was raised as an Episcopalian, as I mentioned before, I don't actively practice religion apart from my deep and overwhelming love of cinema. And when it comes to great cinema, it's hard to find a better filmmaker these days than Paolo Sorrentino. The style is so rich and stimulating, almost intoxicating, and I'm beyond fired up to continue watching more of his work. So obviously, I'm 100% on board with the new Pope. I'm eagerly looking forward to the rest of the season. And I'm going to do my best to come back for reactions and breakdown after every single episode. In any case, I think it's time to wrap this sucker up. So if you enjoyed this reaction and review, please consider subscribing to my channel, liking the video, all that good stuff. It's very helpful to the channel. But if you want to talk more about Italian film or Paolo Sorrentino or whatever, you can always find me on Twitter at Colbrax or leave me a comment in the comments below. But can't thank you enough for watching the video. I really appreciate it. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.